All right, today we're going to go over the Malco FSXS tool. This is a drill-powered tool that seams are 1 inch and 1.5 inch mechanical seam standing seam. So this tool will seam the mechanical seam 100 and mechanical seam 150. First of all, nice hard shell case, very well designed. The tool itself is well supported for just travel and storage. You've got the hex wrenches, Allen wrenches, and you also have your trigger. So this remote trigger is very nice, really, because you don't have to hold your drill on that the whole time. You can go ahead and attach that to your drill and follow, or just use two hands to one to trigger and one to hold down the tool if you need to. So go ahead and pull this out. So the tool itself is designed with a release and engagement for the dies, for the rollers. So what you'll notice is when you close that down, it's going to clamp down on the rib. You release it, it's going to release off of the rib. Looking at the tool itself, it has a drive side, which are rubber, and it has a form side, which are metal. The form side will always be on the side of the rib where everything cramps around. The drive side will always be on the opposite side of the rib. So just thinking about the tool itself, that's the two sides. This has a height adjustment. So right now this is set at 1.5 inches. Using the included Allen wrench, the difference between 1.5 inches and 1 inch is the height of those ribs. So I can loosen those up and drop down the wheels for the 1 inch height. So let's do that just for demonstration. So 4 wheels, and those have 2 positions, either for inch, 1.5 inches. The width of those ribs are the same, so this does not affect the spacing or the pressure needed to seam the panels. It's just how high this will ride off of the flat on the panels. So you can see now that's set to a 1 inch height for our mechanical seam 100 compared to the 150. Another thing we'll talk about is the start position. So if you're starting a panel, you have a set of 3 rollers that form a 90-degree angle. So if you want to do a 90-degree bend only, these seamers are what you'll use, and you'll make sure to engage the seaming pressure just on those 3 rollers. If you want to go ahead and do a 180 seam, which is very common and probably more often used, you'll ensure that the front set of forming rollers is used and engaged, so you'll make sure to engage those. Very straightforward. Counterclockwise reduces the pressure. Clockwise increases the pressure. And those are independent for the back rollers, which is the 90 degree, and those are always required. And the front 2 rollers, which is to finish it off at 180 degrees, and those are optional. If you don't want to make it into a 90, you prefer if you don't want to make it into the 180, you can just engage those back dies. Start position. So if you're starting with let me flip this around a little bit to be more accurate. This is the front of the tool. So the front of the tool is the 3 starting dies. The back of the tool is the last finishing dies, which are optional if you're doing the 180. So just think about that. This is going to be the back of our drill, and this will be the direction we're running the panel. You must run in that direction. And also what you'll note is that the forming dies are on the left side as you're moving. So therefore, the side of the the side of the panel you're forming must always be on the left side as you're seaming those panels. So forming dies on the left side as you're going up from the eave, or if your panels are flipped the other way, if they were, the lock would still be on the left side as you're going down. So on the left side if you're going from the top to bottom. In any case, there is a start mark. This is the point where you would start the edge of your panel that's going to be bent at a 90. So I can either start with that right at the edge of my panel from the eave and make sure that my edge of my panel is going to hit right there, or from the top, if you're going from the top down, the same thing. Just make sure that start mark is right at the edge of your panel. If the edge of your panel is an end wall, or if the edge of the panel is a transition, you may have to pre-seam 2 sections of panel. We'll go over that later in the video, but just note that, and some people go ahead and pre-seam that even if you're starting from the eave and working up. You can use your hand seamers, crimp 2 sections at 90, and then go back and crimp the original section at 180, and then you start your tool still between those two right at the start mark. So the start mark always represents where your 90-degree begins and goes forward. A couple more things about this tool. It has a material thickness option. So if this material thickness is in this position, it's going to work for 016 to 025 thick material. Most of our material will fall in that range, which is going to be from 26 to 24 gauge, is about 019 to 024. So most of the time we're going to have this in the upright position. If on the other hand we're forming something thicker like a 22 gauge metal, or maybe a 030 or 032 aluminum, we're going to pull it up. You hear a little snap, you know it's in position, and now it's ready to form a thicker material. So that basically just makes a little more room between the dies to allow for that thicker material, or lift it up a little bit to reduce the distance on that material. So as I mentioned, this is the FSXS, which is for the inch and a half. We also provide an FSXS2, which is for the 2-inch profile. The 2-inch profile is a different width of panel, and of course also needs to make sure those wheels are a little higher to make sure they're still sitting on the flat of the panel as it goes down the rib. So having gone over the tool, chuck for the drill, engage again is right here. I can go ahead and apply the drill, or I can go ahead and set my thickness approximately to where I want it to be. So in this case, what I know is I want, just based on our specific panel as it stands, I want the front rollers to be set where when I engage them, the seaming pressure is about 1.5 bands, or 1.5 bands are showing. So right now if I close it up, no bands are showing. So I want to go ahead and loosen that up a little bit so that 1.5 bands are showing when it's engaged. So I'm going to go ahead and loosen that up. And I'm going to see what that looks like. And it's still just way too inset. So I'm going to go ahead and continue to move that out. So now about 1 1/4 showing. I can actually do that, make that change while it's engaged, so I'm going to do that. And then the back half for 180 needs to be approximately flush, so I'm going to go ahead and back that out until it's flush. So our final set of rollers are about flush, and the front set are outset by about 1.5 rings of metal. So if you look at that, you can see really the two differences. On the front, 1.5 rings are showing. On the back, it's flush. This sounds good in theory. In reality, what I always recommend is go ahead and order a few extra panels. And what you can do is slice one right down the middle so you can use the male and female legs, and go ahead and test that seamer. Make sure you're comfortable with the pressure before you go down your roof on the real roof. So you can order some 6-foot panels if you want to, or even just a few extra panels at the longest length of your roof, and those can be used just in case you need extra panel, but also you can cut some down for testing or whatever you want to use them for. So again, this is what we found works for this specific panel at this specific thickness. You're going to want to adjust and work with these seaming pressure depending on your specific project. Just make sure you've got it dialed in. So really, having gone through all that, we're going to talk about the cordless drill. So this is what I love about this tool. Historically, mechanical seam was hand seamed. So you're talking about taking a large pair of hand seamers and just working your way up the panel, and maybe using a separate tool or flipping around and working your way up again to get a 90 degree and then a 180. That was great 100 years ago, right? So now we have power, we have electricity. The next step really was a extension cord and a tool about this big, and it served the same purpose, but it did it in 1 or 2 passes. So you may have to make one pass up, and you may have to make another pass up or down, depending on the model. But you're hauling that extension cord up and down the roof. It's bulky. It's not ideal. Extension cord going up and down the roof is just not ideal. So what I love about this tool is it's made by Malco, so they make the best tools in the world. We sell everything they have for metal roofing and siding, right? We love it. So you know it's going to be durable, but you also know it's going to be well made and it's going to serve its function. Portable, works with cordless drill. So we're going to put that on the chuck. I'm going to loosen those. And on the back side of this tool, we have a support, and that support is just going to loop up and under and lock back on to hold that tool in place. Depending on the drill model, you know that's going to depend on where it sets. But the good thing is it's adjustable, so it'll hold it in place regardless. You're going to go ahead and tighten that up, stop that from rotating. You can put it wherever you want and tighten it up. So that would essentially work, right? We have the drill, we have the connection. I can pull the trigger, and you'll see those wheels are turning. But just to go one step further, Malco said, how can we make it better? And obviously they did. So this is the remote trigger. And I saw it and I thought, oh no, I have to assemble my own bike again. But no, it's just really well built. So it has a storage spot on the tool. So that's useful in some cases if you want to control it from right here. But it's also useful for as you're setting up, just kind of keeping it out of your way. So this will, right where your handle grip is, it just locks nicely on there. The cable loops around the trigger. And then right here is where the smaller hex is going to be used. So we'll loosen that up until we can slip this underneath. So just this hex bolt will hold that in place. I'm not trying to pull it real tight. I want it snug on the trigger, but I don't want it so tight that it has a chance of activating the trigger without me squeezing the remote trigger. So I'm gonna go ahead and tighten that up. All right, so that is it. This tool is now ready to use. So I can take my remote trigger off. And the great thing is, we can adjust the speed from a 1 to a 2. But we can also, just like you would with the drill, just adjust your pressure, how hard you squeeze it, and go slow as you want to. So just a really well-built tool. And that is the assembly process, straightforward, comes with instructions. You won't have to do it just by this video. Definitely work through those instructions. As always, a video is a great visual, but the instructions will go through some of those small things that you will want to know before you start operating this drill. Safety first. So I am not using gloves because I'm not handling metal. As soon as I get to that point, I'll want to make sure I'm wearing gloves. And then secondly, remember this has pinch points. So leave the battery off until you're ready to start testing the seamer. If you go to make major adjustments, take the battery off. Last thing you need to do is have your finger inside of those forming dies. You don't want that. If it can crimp a 22 gauge metal roof panel, it can definitely do some bad news to your fingers. So don't lose a digit. Also, some other things about safety is, remember, you're going to be working close to the edge of the roof, and so just make sure you consider that. You can tie off to the tool itself, but also just don't get so close to the edge that you're going to risk having that tool fall off of a 5-story building and hitting someone. So just some practical safety features. But other than that, that is the basic setup for this drill and this tool, and we'll appreciate it. All right, so we're going to take apart and get ready for storage the FSXS. So first thing we're going to do is make sure we have removed the battery from the drill. This is always the first step before you make any modifications or change anything on a tool that's battery powered. So we're going to go ahead and just take that off. Next thing we're going to do is take off the connector for the trigger. So we got a hex just like we put it on. We're just going to loosen it up. Until it can come out. So the trigger is very straightforward. 30 seconds to put on, 30 seconds to take off. For storage, just very well built. You're going to go ahead and lock that in there. You're going to loop this around twice. That fits nicely in there. And there's a couple options as to how you store the cable. You can loop it around twice, which is what I would probably recommend, or you can loop it back through this way. It doesn't matter which you go with, as long as it's not sharp angles that might result in the cable having a hard time maintaining its flexibility later. So that is for the trigger. Next, I'm going to go ahead and remove the tool. So we're going to take the bungee off. Loosen the chuck and set that aside. The support for the drill, I'm going to go ahead and loosen that, rotate it around. So the next thing we're going to do is go ahead and tighten up the seaming pressure. So if we tighten that up all the way, what that will do is allow us to fit it in the box. And what you'll notice is it allows the handle to stay parallel with this mark on the case of the tool, and that will allow it to fit properly in the box. So a little thing, you don't have to set the wheels up or down. So if the wheels are set at 1 inch, as they are now, you can leave them that way. But if they're also dropped down to 1.5 inches, the case is designed to allow relief, so it can work stored either way. So we're going to go ahead and put that in the box. So again, what you want to see is that tool approximately lined up with this mark in the case, so it will close properly. Take our Allen wrenches and store those. And just before we close it up, just make sure we've got the trigger, we've got the tools, the Allen wrenches, and we've got the tool. And then we'll go ahead and close that box up. So pretty straightforward, but just a really well designed tool and well protected with this case.